Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Katerina Sergaskova. I'm a little bit cold. I'm really happy to be here and to greet all of you here at the Danish Union of Journalists, and I'm really thankful for hosting us today. I'm a executive director of the Daily Humanity organization based in Kyiv and Copenhagen. It's a whole different story why we ended up here, but today we brought experts from Ukraine and Denmark who have extensive and almost lifelong experience in covering conflicts. It's journalists and TV producers, Roman Stepanovich and Matilda Kimmer, and I will tell more about that. We're going to learn today about the challenges that journalists face across the globe and in war zone closer to us in Ukraine. We'll learn about physical toll and mental health toll on the war have on journalists and how newsrooms react on the challenges that journalists are facing. Unfortunately, we will not be able to show you the virtual reality module today because of the technical issues we have, and it's really unfortunate because our software is not it's our partner software, and it relies on Meta. And sometimes Meta has issues on the technical side, and it affects the software that we use. So I will try to show you the video on how we use the virtual reality stuff, and I also have one example with me, so so you can just see and observe. But yeah, unfortunately, we will not be able to kind of experience this VR as we promised in the announcement. But it also means that we will have more time to talk and to exchange our ideas and stories, and I hope that will kind of make more sense while not having the VR training. So a little bit about us. So I'm a executive director of the Daily Humanity, but I'm also I'm a journalist with 20 years experience in human rights and war zones experience. Matilda Kimmer is Russia and Ukraine correspondent for DR, and she's been nominated for the Calvin Prize in 2022. And she's laureate of Abby Munck Award, and she's been covering war in Ukraine and situation in Russia and Belarus for many years, for almost 20 years, right? A lot. And Roman Stepanovich is Ukrainian producer. He's co-founder of Zaborona Media. He got Peabody Award for his documentary TV series Inside Putin's Russia for PBS NewsHour, American television. And before we start our conversation, I'm going to share with you some insights into safety and press freedom and mental health issues in journalism. So I prepared a presentation. So it can be a little bit of confusion. 2402 Foundation is an initiative led by Daily Humanity, and it was established right in the beginning of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And our main goal was to support journalists with equipment like bulletproof vests and helmets, because thousands of journalists found themselves naked without any protection. And even didn't know how to report from a war zone. And then we developed a safety training program for them, and the organization became basically a safety infrastructure for them and a huge resource hub. So now we provide safety and mental resilience trainings, support strategies for journalists and civil society, and advisory. I mean, this is the picture of the state of freedom of press globally. And it's 2024 data, and we can easily see that the green area is very small. And we're basically in a green area, right? So Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway are here. So we are in one of the few safe countries for journalists globally. And it's a green picture. It wasn't like that even a few years ago. So it's a recent picture. And somewhere here, no, Greenland is green. Okay. Yeah. So, but a little bit to the left, there is a United States, and probably this year, this map will be also different. It will be probably orange or even red. We don't know. So by the end of this year, something will change, probably. And we can clearly see that the red area is huge, it means that there are multiple violations of freedom of speech. It means that there are journalists in jails. There are laws that forbid some stories that journalists would like to tell, and many other things. And according to the World Press Freedom Index, 80% of the world's population has now less freedom of expression than back in 2000. So through these years, there was a kind of shift and decline in the press freedom globally. Even though we can think that it's not that bad, but probably we now can see, from this data that it's not that good as it was. And 50% or even more people live in countries where press freedom is in a very serious situation, meaning that they experience a lot of violations and limitations. And of course, there are several wars globally, and journalists are being injured and killed and jailed because of the conflicts. The deadliest countries now is, of course, Palestine, and especially Gaza Strip, is Ukraine, Latin America, with especially Mexico on this map. And just a little bit of numbers into this green picture. So in the last year, 54 journalists were killed, and most of them in conflict zones during their professional work in the fields. It's Iraq, Sudan, Myanmar, Ukraine, and half of them is Palestine, Gaza. And in 2023, when the war in Gaza and Palestine just started, 120 journalists were killed, and most of them in Gaza. So it was 99 journalists killed in Gaza, particularly. So it's a huge numbers, unprecedented. I mean, it's also over 500 journalists are in captivity elsewhere. Around 40 people are in jail in Russia, even more in Belarus. And also, from the recent data, 30 Ukrainian journalists are in Russian captivity. And they are particularly targeted for their professional work. So they've been jailed because they reported on some crucial stuff in their countries or in foreign countries as well. So there are also foreign correspondents in jails in different countries, like Syria, for example. So as an organization that have most of the activities in Ukraine in the last 3 years, we have a lot of data on what's going on there and how the war affects journalists. At least 18 journalists were killed on duty in Ukraine. And more than 40 of them, more than 40 Ukrainian journalists were injured since the beginning of the invasion. Last year, in the end of last year, Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshina was like she died in Russian captivity. She spent more than 1 year illegally in the prison because Russia didn't want her to report from the occupied territory. She was only 27. And also in the middle of last year, missile attack hit the hotel in Kramatorsk in the eastern Ukraine. And the crew of Reuters was injured, and security advisor Ryan Evans got killed. Yeah, so I see your hands.
How did 30 Ukrainian journalists end up in Russian captivity?
I can tell you more about that afterwards, but basically 30 Ukrainian journalists are those who reported from the occupied territories and those who used to live on the occupied. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, they lived in the territories they occupied. So that's how they ended up in Russian captivity. So when Russian special forces learned about them, and they did not cooperate, so they just held them in and imprisoned them illegally. Sorry. So the last year missile attack. Just to finish this part, because it still has a discussions and has a toll on community in Ukraine. Videographer of Reuters team was heavily injured because he stayed in this hotel and he spent 2 months in coma, and now he's kind of handicapped, so he cannot work anymore. So he's just still recovering, and we still don't know if he can recover fully after that. The work and life in war setting has a huge toll on mental health of journalists and media workers as a whole. But just overall, around 15 million Ukrainians experiencing different mental health issues, and they will probably need psychological support, and a big part of them, about 3 or 4 million, will require medication for that. So this is the data on the last year from World Health Organization. And we at our organization conducted a survey, research into the mental health of journalists, and we asked them a lot of questions about their mental health. So the data shows that most of the journalists, like 84% of journalists report that they're experiencing trauma because of their work as a journalist, and not necessarily because of their war reporting. Sometimes it's just people who work at the desk in the office in Kyiv. Most of the people, like 90%, experienced burnout due to the overwhelming amount of work. It's too much work, it's too much pressure, and they feel that they need to work even more because it's war, and they need to report on that. So they experience burnout. And over 50% say that they experienced symptoms of PTSD, different symptoms like flashbacks or panic attacks or other issues with mental health. And at the same time, almost half of journalists say that they cannot speak about this issue with their leadership, with their managers, editors, or even with their peers. And also they don't have enough resources to overcome these challenges. So they don't have capacity, or they don't have financial support for doing that.
This survey, was this conducted strictly with Ukrainian employed journalists, or was this also foreign newscasts?
No, it's only Ukrainian journalists, because there is a difference when you live in your own country and report within your country. It has a little bit different, because you don't have a place to come back, and it's different with foreigners.
But there were also Ukrainians working in foreign desks in Ukraine. So they're local, working locally,
Yeah,
but
thanks.
the employer is not Ukrainian.
Yeah. Yeah, so and you can adapt to these different economic and professional challenges, which is also part of the problem. Because of the war, so almost 400 and even more news outlets in Ukraine experienced shutdown, so they closed in the beginning of the invasion due to occupation or decline with revenues, or simply because they could not handle the situation. More than 70% of journalists struggle financially. This job is underpaid for sure. And now we have American aid crisis. I don't know if how many of them of you know about this issue, but 90% Ukrainian newsrooms relied on American aid financially. So it means that there will be new shutdowns and new troubles with media freedom, and also with news deserts, as we call it. There is also a problem with brain drain because of migration, war, and low pay. People just change jobs or go outside of Ukraine and find, kind of new destiny for them because they can't find it in their home country. And also, there are a lot of crises at the same time. When the war broke out in Palestine and Israel in 2023, the attention to Ukrainian war has shifted, and it changed a landscape, and also financial support. It kind of redirected to other countries and other crises. And when you have a lot of crises at the same time, you cannot recover properly and continue work sustainably. So you have to always kind of put out the fires. So what we did to address these challenges, and I want to be really short. I will try to be short. So we created a so-called safety factory. We trained more than 1,000 journalists, producers, news managers, media professionals, everyone who reported from war, with hostile environment first aid training. It's a course when you just train different kind of skills to be able to survive and stay safe in emergency situation. And so we created, in fact, a safety culture among media and civil society. So now a lot of people are prepared, and they can handle different situations even better. We integrated virtual reality that unfortunately we cannot show you today, but we integrated it in our courses, and it ensured a better learning experience. So it practically helps to get skills in a smarter, smoother way. And one of our most successful cases in this safety factory is that 73% of journalists now routinely assess their risks before doing tasks, before going to the front lines or investigate something. 90% of people have never did risk assessment before they got training. So they even didn't know about the concept of risk assessment and what it is. So it improved a lot of things, and one of the important part of it was that when people are prepared for the stressful situation, then they feel less stress when they do their work, and not only reporting from the dangerous zones, but just overall they are more confident in what they're doing. And for our students reported us that they saved the life of people. We also developed mental resilience training because we had a huge need for that because the challenges journalists face in terms of mental health was overwhelming. So we studied psychological impact of journalism in Ukraine, and we investigated how their life and work in war zone affects their professional abilities. And I showed a glimpse of it. The full report will be in March. We trained half a hundred of media professionals, trainers and psychologists with trauma-informed leadership training together with Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma. And it helped them to gain essential skills for resilience. And we designed our own hostile environment, mental awareness and resilience training. So we could help people to build such skills and be prepared even more to manage stress, to do psychological first aid and so on and so forth. So it helps a lot to prevent some things from developing. And we are now in process of designing a virtual reality training tool for resilience skill for fighting disinformation, which is one of the also great challenges for worldwide. And we're also working on AI-driven psychological awareness tool to help people with awareness. And just lessons learned. Maybe it would be helpful for some of you who do education, who work as editor or journalist or go somewhere overseas. We learned that emergency efforts are at best when they are combined with prevention, preparedness, and proactiveness. So when you think that something can happen, and you build a network of people who have skills to overcome some hard challenges, then you can rely on them better. When your staff has the skills, it means that if something happens, then they can teach others on how to survive, and they help them in a better way. We learned that media is critical infrastructure, and when you don't have information that you can trust in a war zone, then you easily can put yourself in danger. So it's crucial, and journalists who work with some uncomfortable topics, they must have access to safety training. We also see safety as a important part and cornerstone of media viability because it's vital for survival, for the newsrooms, for the organizations. It's a crucial part. And investing in skills is so beneficial for everyone. It helps to be prepared and prevent many things from happening, and it helps people right away. And in the longer term, it also have a huge impact because you can rely on people who are skilled enough to resist crisis. And the man on the photograph is Gavin Rees from Dart Center. Maybe some of you know him or heard about him. He's a trainer on trauma, and this thing that he's showing is practically what he's saying is that tiny little things can help us to change our behavior and can help us to be better and feel better when we put these tiny little things in our schedule every day. So this is what we learn. If we want to make changes, if we want to do something with, in our profession or in our newsroom, in our, small community, then we can easily just do it even without resources, just by doing small little things. And learning saves lives, and it helps to make better decisions. This is what we learned a lot, and still learning from the wars, and we're always eager to share it. this is it from my side. I suggest that if you have questions, I suggest that we keep them for the end of the discussion, and then we will have time to exchange and to speak a little bit more about that. And here's also a QR code to our websites and our contact, so you can just easily chat with us if you would like to. So, I will sit. Thank you so much for listening and for asking questions. Probably from this global picture that I have shown, we see that we need changes on so many different levels. And it's always a question of where do we start? And I really like the fact that Matilda Kimmer is here, because she's been covering a war and conflicts for 20 years, and she never properly speak, right? Or maybe just a little bit, but I think never properly spoke in public about the toll that war had on her. So, and I really want this event to be honest and open, and that we can exchange our experiences and some, I think it's important to be honest about things, because now is a time when there so many things are happening and they're not really good things, especially with journalism and press freedoms. And I believe that if we can speak honestly about what we experience as professionals, then we can actually change things. We can kind of find solutions to that if we are being open. So my first question would be to you, Matilda, and to you, Roman, as well. But I want to start with you. Can you share the most challenging moment in your professional life that was hard to handle, and what did you do, and why it was hard to handle?
Well, I think there's been a lot of challenging moments, and I don't think I think I've been quite open about them, especially with my boss. Some of them, one of them is here. So I guess there are two different types of big challenges, I guess, working in a war zone. One of them is witnessing human suffering. And I think sometimes it's worse to see the person that wasn't killed looking at the person grieving. So I have been at more funerals and pre-funerals than I wish for. And that emotional toll is really difficult. So I allow myself to cry a lot, according to my husband. So that's one part of the challenges. Another part that I think what has been most stressing for me was not the 5,000 lives you have to do or producing and editing and all of that, but it's actually been more stressing for me when an editor has been like, what? There are 100 people died in this whatever day of the war, and you give zero meeps. So that is even more stressing. When you feel like you're in the center of something really horrible, and people like, but they also died yesterday. And I guess that's kind of the phase we're in now. I'm making it a little bit, black and white, but covering an area like now it's Ukraine, and knowing that the interest of your editors and to some extent the public is peaking, and then just until something extraordinarily horrible happens. That is, I think that at least it's a competitor to what is most challenging. because you know you're standing with something really horrible, and at a normal situation in time, this would absolutely be the biggest story we were discussing, but now it's not, because there's a dude in the White House doing something even more crazy or saying really crazy stuff, and you feel like you are just a tiny anecdote or example. I was in Ukraine in January 2015, and the war was really, and we didn't even want to call it a war, it was just a conflict. It's a war. There were tanks, there were people dying everywhere. It's a war. And I was in the rebel-controlled area in Donetsk, and I remember calling my editor, and he was like, "Yeah, but we have a terror attack in Paris." And I was reading about it, and I could see that was really horrible, and 6 people died. And then I was looking out the window, I'm thinking 200 people are dying right here, but that's not how it goes. And then you can get this really huge frustration that nobody's listening. And I can't even begin to imagine, if you're covering Africa, how you'd feel in that kind of getting through the wall of attention.
Okay, so you just couldn't speak about the stories you saw, right?
No, the interest is just, it's like the stock market. It's up and down, and it's really hard if you're in a low point to, you have all of this experience and images in your head and on your camera, and people are more like, maybe next week. And that's much worse than having 5 deadlines hanging over you, to me at least. I don't know about you.
Yeah, Roman, how about you?
That's basically the same. I think the stock market exchange. That's exactly how you can compare it with. I don't know. I had this issue with empathy. My problem was that I did a lot of covering being Ukrainian in Ukraine. So what was great when I was in Thailand, in Myanmar, when you cover about that, something bad is happening, you're trying to make a story about that, maybe it's not good enough currently somewhere in the US to show, because one person shut down in the downtown Manhattan is more important than 10 people shut down on a protest in a central Yangon. So you always, you want, that's actually the cost of life. Do we like it or not? But that's really it. So one person something bad will gonna happen in Denmark would be more important than 100 die somewhere in Botswana or elsewhere, because you're Danes, you care about what is happening in your country. Same I had, but I also had to explain to my editors all the time that what is happening right now is very important. And the hardest was to find empathy, to show it right, because my audience was not in Ukraine, my audience was in Britain and in the US. And you try to show it, try to compare, and every time you're trying to jump higher and higher in the way you show it, in the amount of level of disasterness of what is happening, because the next time it's harder to sell and sell and sell. I'm not saying to sell as being a freelancer. Will they buy or not? They will take it as you're in a contract. The way is will that be interesting to the public? So every time should become something more horrible than before. So one Russian tank in 2014 was a big deal. 10 tanks in 2015 in Ukraine was like, we have seen that Russians in Ukraine already. Now 100 tanks is not a thing anymore. Maybe one Russian tank or American tank in Greenland will be a big thing. But if you will look into that in the timeline of like 6-12 months, maybe it won't be a thing. So every time you're trying to show something more and more horrible to keep public interested. I'm not trying to say entertained or amazed, but if you are detached, if it's not your home public, people are in fact being entertained in some point. That's the most horrible thing when you're covering your own country. That was for me.
Okay, so how are you coping with that? What kind of strategies you have, like talking with family or editor or colleagues? Like what works?
Not covering much war anymore. I think that's to Matilda.
Well, you know, we have this supposed rule that you have to be debriefed by a crisis psychologist if you come home from a war zone. And in the first many years, I followed that very strictly. I went to see a psychologist, and we sat there for an hour. And sometimes you have a good chemistry, and then you have actually an interesting conversation. Sometimes you're sitting with a person explaining that the one that was in before had the same kind of pain because his cat died, and you're like, right. Just forgot I had a meeting. So, I mean, all of that is also, it's the rule has been made with good reason to check that everything is sort of working, also for your colleagues' security. But it's not always the most effective way to see a professional. So I guess the risk is, I suppose, I'm not a professional, but the risk is that the further you, the more war and conflict you cover, the not the less affected, but the more you know what your own reaction is. And I know that when I start becoming very sound sensitive, like jumping up if somebody honks the horn, or I get slightly more irritated than I normally would at my kids, I know that I probably have to not go to frontline for a little while. My husband also makes a point of telling me when I... but in the beginning, I didn't know that was it. I mean, I just felt a little bit...
You figure out it yourself, right?
Well, with the help of psychologists also, but I mean, you don't. What I've always found interesting is that often the people who feels most ready to face war when they don't have any experience are often the ones least prepared for it, because you really don't know how you're going to react when there's suddenly shelling around you, or when you see people dying or starting to die. I mean, being very critically injured. So it's, I think the whole thing about being honest with yourself, you started saying it as well, being honest with yourself and your reaction, and allowing yourself to be scared and sad and shocked by human cruelty, because there's a lot of this shit going on inside you. And sometimes people ask me, you're so brave, are you never scared? Shit, I'm scared every fucking time. I sometimes even get scared before I enter Ukraine. So
that's the most scary.
It's even more scary, yeah. No, but I don't think... It's just important not to play some kind of weird hero about it. Like, we are scared, and it is dangerous, and people trying to be Rambo-like unaffected, I don't like to have them in my team. So sometimes when I come across occasionally like local producers being very Rambo-ish, I'm like, please don't be close to me, because that's the most dangerous people, because they don't accept the risk. Or they don't want to, they just want to ignore it and no thanks.
They accept it too much.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, but you're not only working, Matilda, in a war zone, in the actual war zone like Ukraine. You just recently went to Belarus, right? And according to the press index, it's extremely dangerous, because more than 40 journalists are in jails, and there is also a risk for foreign correspondents to end up in jail or in some kind of exchange of prisoners even, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what is the nature of being a journalist in these kind of settings? When it's not when you not immediately see the risks, but they are everywhere.
Yeah. So I guess the recipe to covering that is really having a lot of knowledge beforehand about how risky it is, because it doesn't look very risky. It's really, pretty. They clean the streets every morning. Even when it's raining, the little water wagon comes around cleaning the pavement. So everything looks quite cozy and nice. So that's knowledge and awareness. And I guess to me, this trip to Belarus was the first time in 5 years. Before that, I was covering the huge protests, and it was just grabbing any person on the street and they would tell you a crazy story about being hunted by police. And it was just basically just turn on your camera and you had a story. And this time I had a briefing beforehand with our security company, discussing as well that to the best of my knowledge and the contacts that I had, I could not reach out to anybody while I was there. Or if I did, I would put them in danger. And maybe even myself. So the people I spoke to was in cryptid messaging, and I didn't make one single normal interview. I spoke to old babushka, old grandmas in the village who almost the same sentences told me that Lukashenko was the best and only thing that happened to Belarus since '94, and completely, it was like I was in the circus or being the circus, because sometimes people were standing taking pictures of old journalists suddenly in town. So it's a completely different thing. I had 2 telephones with me that were completely stripped of anything personal, so no contacts, no nothing, no apps. So productive? Not really, but it was the first time in 5 years I was allowed to come there. So we did. We took a chance, and I came back, and there were a couple of KGB guys standing when I was filming inside because there was an election. Yeah. So I was filming inside this polling station, had all the permissions, and then I just really fast I just grabbed my tripod and I came out, and there was these 2 guys standing dark close. They always look the same, like these KGB guys, and they were like, and then they were like, oh shit, she saw us, tick, 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 tick. And then they were like crapping their way down the hall. They were not very secret. And I guess every reporter being there knows that there are people hired to watch what you're doing. And that meant I was doing very little. I walked around Minsk for, 50 kilometers those days, just because that was my way of trying to suck up a little bit of the tension. But nobody said anything. There were no gatherings. There were nothing. Yeah. There were not even people voting. Very few. So so that was really, really difficult. But at the same time, up to the election, you had these videos where they had taken some of the journalists who are imprisoned and made interviews with them in their cells and put it on national TV, where they could say, yes, I was guided by American money. Yes, I was doing all the wrong things, and my only goal was to talk shit about the government, and I regret it.
Yeah, it's interesting how the dictatorships telling us that journalists are not important, and they are so not important that they just imprison them and make this propaganda with them, saying that press freedom is some kind of built on American money circus. Roman, can you tell about the nature of risky work?
I think that map with red countries, it could be named Friends and Lovers of Russia and China. So just change the name and you'll get actually all the allies of Russia and China. I'm just, if you look into it, it's China, North Korea, Egypt, Sudan, Venezuela. So it's there. Friends of friends, right? I don't know. I think it's this is pretty much it. I had this perfect combo back in days, as you mentioned, on a work on inside Putin's Russia. So there was a lot of intensive work actually getting stories in a country where people are too afraid to say stories on topics like, Russians taking part in, back in days, it was ISIS, it was a big thing. And, Russian language was the second after Arabic in ISIS, because so many people came from post-Soviet countries, take part in Islamic State. And, stories like that, it's really a lot of attention from security services you get. And I had a perfect combo because I was Ukrainian working for American TV in Russia. So that's a perfect cocktail to get you in trouble in every single airport, in every single checkpoint or bus station. I got it all. And
You've been in jail like so many times.
so many, not jail, I mean like interrogated with the same questions, despite how far regions are from each other. So apparently they have the same book. But what is very important, as you said, like that guy's standing somewhere in a corner so you can see them, or they try not to be seen. But I have figured out, I don't know if it's still a Russian thing, but a part of that of their work is to show that they are following you. It's just to grow that deep paranoia in you, so you will feel that you're being surveilled all the time. So you watch your steps, words, actions, anything, and you becoming so paranoid. And of course, if you're quite empathic person, as I believe I am, you are too afraid also to get people into trouble because you don't know whether they are surveilled or not. And what they're trying to do, they're trying to get after the person you've been talking to, ask questions that people are not prepared to you, and you understand that you put people in danger, and you stop doing things, if you care, of course. And that was a horrible thing. That's definitely what you will find in any security protocol if you work, let's say, with security teams as a journalist, because usually it comes to physical security, because you don't want to be, I don't know, to get into trouble, like in prison, get hit in your head during the protest, civil unrest, or get a bullet on the front line. But what very important, I believe, is that mental resilience and the contact and safety is not a game or a play of one actor. You need backup. You need someone in your office to back you up. And people in the office, they know nothing of what you're going through, but also because they believe it's so toxic, they don't want to know much about that. So I know that sounds ridiculous, but we're talking about like big companies, about big American and British companies. I don't know how things are in Danish, TV stations, but I think it's more or less the same everywhere. It's just like, you know how to do your job, you are there, you know it better, do it. And from that moment, you understand that you're on your own, and none of the security team know nothing how to deal with it when you're preparing for it, because there's nowhere to prepare. Even we redesigned a lot of protocols specifically for Ukrainian needs, and there's nowhere how you can prepare on this. It's very hard to go through it, and there's no recovery plan or whatsoever. There's no protocols. There's no even ideas or visions how to help that person recover after he or she is going through. When they go back, maybe they're fine, but maybe they still feel followed, or they still feel paranoid. That's what I felt. I left Russia for half a year. I actually felt it, and in many different places. And there's no one to help much about that. So I think that's the security part. This mental security is something that is coming, but also I think it's coming also because we kind of figure out what to do with physical security. It's about making it a culture, as you mentioned, in different newsrooms, in different organizations, just to get a common sense of it. But with this mentalist, we're still very far away from
Look,
solutions.
I want to ask you about the safety training program that you designed. I know that there was, you trained almost 1,000 journalists. It's a lot. It's a huge kind of data on how journalists behave, what they need, what they, what kind of knowledge they lack of. So, what was the most surprising thing in educating them in risk assessment?
In Ukraine,
What you discovered about journalists in Ukraine.
Well, as you shown, this 90% of people did not. They knew nothing about what to do with risk assessment. What risk assessment is, what are risks? Yeah, so people believe that risks and consequences is basically what they more than everything scared of, but not reality what can be there. Like they're scared of getting in captivity, but if you go into numbers, you will figure out that more people get killed because of bullets and shrapnel, or in traffic accidents. We do not count them as journalists got into trouble in car accidents, but people are driving crazy in war zones, and the mortality for the last 2 years is huge in, let's say, in Eastern Ukraine. This is something that you will not see in security protocols in organizations. So people do not compare the reality and their expectations and their understanding, feeling of risks. And yeah, I think I told about that, but the most surprising thing is, despite country like Ukraine being more than 10 years in a war with Russia, bosses, chief producers, they don't have any security measures, protocols. They believe, like, if we work in a newsroom, we have fire extinguishers, we have additional exit from the building. That's how we care about security. They still believe that insecurity, unsafe places are somewhere on the front lines, but actually it's everywhere in the country, and they always leave questions like security on the shoulders of people who are doing this. You are a war correspondent, you work in that area, you know it better. But they never think about many other professionals, let's say, like video or photo editors. Like that people going through very graphic images dozens of times per day, watching really tough gore visuals, and they're making it daily. And there are a few stories about guys who were hired as moderators for YouTube, flagging videos of killed cats, tortured people, and that people uploaded stuff. It immediately goes off. Now it's in the hands of AI, but it used to be 10 years ago, it was a different picture. And people were going crazy, literally. They had psychiatric problems in a week. And people in newsrooms, I'm not talking about Ukrainian newsrooms, like maybe people working in Danish newsrooms in Czech, they're going through it, and there's no protocols, safety protocols for that as well.
Yeah, Matilda?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think, well, first of all, regarding mental health, I feel like there is this tendency to either consider people completely cuckoo, PTSD, unable to function like a normal person, yep, or absolutely unaffected, which is not, that's a crazy scale. Because first of all, you're not permanently situated one place. If you try it enough times, you can feel when you're sliding towards cuckoo or you're sliding back. So that's one thing. You're not just coping fine because you cried yesterday. No, so there is also a scale of this and also a scale of crazy, but that's another story. But I just wanted to say, I think it's completely underrated how much of an effect it has when your colleagues or your boss or wife but when you're asked about it.
Yeah.
And regarding those, I remember we were sitting a couple of the people in our workplace who goes out to see kind of crazy shit, and then we were sitting, maybe it was the Breivik, or it was one of these very felt like close to home, or maybe it was Krutun. I don't remember, but it was like a terrorist attack close to here, and then the whole newsroom was offered psychology talks afterwards, and we were just sitting. I remember it because we were just having a beer, and we were like, So they were looking at pictures, you say. And we had this feeling, Jesus fucking Christ, we're the ones catching rats with our hands almost, or like Vanya with an Iskander. And it felt so unfair. And I know this sounds a little bit hypocritical, but it made me realize how important it is that you feel like somebody's gonna, just pull you up if you get really sad or scared or something. I mean, at least to me, when I have a conversation with a colleague or a boss after something bad, at least I get the feelings that somebody would give a fuck if I was exploded somewhere.
Yeah.
Because the other feeling is actually, I mean, maybe even worse than the danger itself. The feeling that nobody really cared.
Yeah, pretty much. And the other thing is regarding training is I was wondering that before the full scale invasion, and not only in Ukraine, then I started asking people in Balkans, in other places. So most of trainings, especially like HIFA trainings that prepares you to work in a hostile environment, were made by this same methodology and protocols that it's like one standard, one size fits all. And it was I just remember that in the very beginning, like a good friend of mine, he just told me this. So there was a German company that came to Ukraine to train a big amount of freelance journalists. And a part of training was if you or your teammate got injured, try to help him, use your first aid kit as you trained, find a ditch, find a cover, and over the radio that you've been provided by the military. That's in Ukraine, like who will give you a radio? Sometimes it's one radio in the beginning for the squad, right? Not just to give anyone, or frequencies. And over radio, explain your situation and wait for a helicopter to evacuate you.
Awesome.
Helicopter.
And yeah, that's passenger helicopters will not come even closer 5, 6, 10 miles in Ukraine to the front line because it's shut down immediately. And
especially with drones and all that.
And most
warfare.
of that trainings and protocols are being still explained, and people are being educated. But most of that are prepared for, I call it this way, white Western people fighting with all that best ammunition against guys with small arms driving in pickup trucks. It's mainly like this because
also soldier training.
Exactly. That's how Western companies see. Because if we have a Danish journalist, he probably will go with the Danish military to Afghanistan, and the guys who are fighting against you are guys in pickup trucks with guns, and we have everything. So they don't have a chance if they will ever try to do something against you, and we will send all the planes and helicopters. This is not how it works when you are in a war with a country like Russia, or God forbid Taiwan with China, or any other places. And I think this is where the reality has changed or is changing, but we're not with that change. We're not following it quite yet.
Yeah, so we've been talking about a lot of challenges and troubles sometimes journalists got into because of some policies or protocols that doesn't work anymore. So many things are changing. So how do you see the future of journalism, and what should be changed to kind of be a better to journalists to be in a better place than it's now? I mean, any ideas?
I believe journalism became less and less safe, even in countries that consider to be safe. And this is, I'm not telling that this is something that society should cherish more than they used to do, and you should rethink your how you consider journalists. But I remember this story of a good friend of mine, Mstislav Chernov and Evgeny Maloletko. Both of them, they were that Associated Press journalists who were in besieged Mariupol, and they made this documentary film, 20 Days in Mariupol. Maybe some of you has watched it. If not, open Netflix. It's still there. It's amazing. It's a piece of art. But that's a piece of art that could be a cost of life, mental part we're not talking about. But I remember when he said when they were together with the police squad, I think, and they have opened the warehouse of a supermarket. There was a lot of foods, canned food, and they took it all together and they tried to distribute it to people who needed it most. And it was a horrible humanitarian situation back then. And when they brought water and canned food, people were going first to people in a blue vest with a press sign. And they said, like, do not come to us. They're giving you food. We just filming. They said, we don't need that food. What is happening? And there was less than 1 week of living in isolation. So the most critical part, infrastructure, will not be at some point delivery of food or water, clean drinking water, but information. What is happening? What should I do? What is my next step? You need to, orient in that information. You need to get that information from somewhere to make your decision. If you don't have one, you get Belarus. That the best news of the day is we have a best president since 1994. That's it. End of story.
Well, I guess I think still we are in Denmark. We're a little spoiled that there is still some very high standards in journalism, but I don't see them rising. I guess I'm probably seeing the opposite with the time pressure and it feels also like the time of not journalism but opinionism is really popular. So like bloggerization of news, and which to me is super dangerous, because I think we still do in Denmark have news that most people trust. Yes, there are people crying conspiracy at everyone, and that's another risk actually that we haven't even mentioned. I think I at least I see in a lot of young colleagues some really them changing into not journalism but more into commercial PR because of the effect from really angry social media people. I mean people coming after them for their journalism, like very openly, very aggressively, which is another thing that really can affect you mentally in your wish to cover sensitive topics. I mean, not least the Middle East. I think the colleagues we have that cover that, they receive like hate mail from all sides simultaneously whenever they open their mouth.
Yeah. So do you think that something should be like? Do you see that there is a window for change or an idea what we can do to improve it?
Well, I think we as journalists, we have to be extremely serious about our responsibility. And that takes time, and that means that the super fast and just stealing and scissoring from each other, it's that's one part of the game. But I think the most important thing, especially now when everybody feels like whatever comes out, all the news are just super depressing, so at least make them correct. I mean, that's a minimum, and I guess it's a good thing I'm from DR, slow and old elephant. But I mean, it's just really important that we take ourselves serious enough to make the stories right, even if it takes half an hour more or 1 hour more or another day. And I mean, that's for the bosses around in the media houses to decide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. We open for the questions. So please, if you want to ask something or to say something, to share your stories, it's highly appreciated.
Anyone?
Yeah. Yeah. Please. And then you'll be the same.
Is there any specific safety measures you would like to see at your working places to not develop, but to have a better working environment for yourselves? Is there something that you wish you had, or that you to feel more safe and to maybe safeguard journalism in a bigger terms also? I don't know. Yeah.
Is it the question for both?
Yeah,
right?
both. Just.
I have seen a lot of newsrooms in developing democracies. Let's call it this way, when things very often goes off for various reasons. And I think a very important part of safety is just to feel that you are someone is watching your back. And that someone should not be just a feeling, that people should be trained, they should know what to do. And even if it's tiny, small newsroom of 20 people, they should be people trained. Maybe will be a guy who doing, I don't know, just videography and stuff. But if he is keen to help and he knows he can follow, this is not a rocket science. That's basically check in, check out in the beginning, the end of the day, to have a certain ideas and protocols of how you communicate, and you understand that in case if you as a journalist go off the radar, you know that someone will do something, and you know what that something will be. I also, I'm not saying we have a big organization like the New York Times or DR having their security contractors that know what to do. And then we have small underfunded media that's always in trouble. No, I remember times of rest in peace, Vice Media, that I gave my best years to. But they had none. They had none. And when I worked in occupied territories back in 2015, and there was a blackout of Ukrainian cell towers. There was officially they cut it off from Ukraine side, and they had nothing from their side. So you just live in a void, in communication void. They don't have connection with you. I don't have connection with them, and nobody knows what to do. And there was no protocol, no idea. So as long as you know, let's say I got into captivity, I got shot, I don't know, something, they know what to do. They know whom to, where was your last point where you have been. That's on a personal side, and on organizational side, it's much easier to drown a media company, small and middle size, without doing any harm to journalists. In that developing democracies, the main bank account frozen and all your organization is gone. People do not get salaries, they cannot operate. People start thinking about how I will pay for my apartment, how I'll pay for my children's school, or what this, and then everybody is focused on themselves. They are on survival. And in many countries, most of countries, even in Europe, there's no such thing as a casse. Right?
That was like a commercial for.
Yeah, you go to Poland. There's nothing like this there. In Moldova, to post-Soviet countries, there's no such thing. So you live from the money you get from your salary. If you don't have, it's gone. In 3 months, you bring back that money, you cannot get your company back. So it's organizational safety, and usually that organizations, they don't have a plan. When everything goes well, extremely well, like in Denmark, that's one cut of cable of internet by a friendly big country in the east. You'll see how things can go really dark.
I think if I take it down to a very practical level, first of all, I think we should all have first aid training as a society. I mean, not just journalists, but everybody should know basic first aid. And then, I mean, in our trivselsmåling, there's always a question that I find really interesting, and it's like, do you have at least one colleague that you can talk about everything or anything to? And I always wondered, what if you actually wrote no? Then what? Your boss would come and say, okay, let's talk about it. Because it's so important. It's so important that it should actually be kind of structured. I don't know, a buddy, I mean, you're not allowed to go diving on your own, right? But it feels like sometimes doing journalism can be like being underwater, just with a lot of aggressive sharks around you, yeah? And what if you don't have a buddy? Then you're there on your own. And I just think that, especially mental health, it's also really important to know what to do if your leg is blown off or your camera guy's leg is blown off. But that's kind of, it's not easy. But you can train, you got your tourniquet, you can do it on your own. But what do you do if you're really hurt, like mentally? And who's gonna ask you? Who's gonna remember to ask you? Unless you go really annoying as a colleague, who's gonna remember that? And we don't have any systems for that, at least. So I doubt that small, medium size do.
Yeah, it was kind of what you were saying, as kind of insinuate as well, like talking that could maybe be good that there was one who was back home who was in charge of always like every day making sure that you were still doing fine or something.
Yeah. We've been training even financial stuff. Like it was in one small organization that someone had to be that backup plan. And it was actually a lady from financial department who felt herself like, I can do something right now. And you never know, but people sometimes they feel that they are on such a huge distance between Matilda and someone sitting in Copenhagen office, but maybe they're willing to. I'm not. There's no parallels. I'm talking about like smaller organizations, but they're willing to. And again, there's no rocket science. And then she became with the second position after her first being an accountant. She's watching back of reporters. I cannot say military reporters because the media itself is based in Kharkiv, so it's all the war zone. But yeah, she does it. She is, I don't know, like 50 plus, and she does her great job.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you had a question.
I have a question regarding the freedom of press in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's a war propaganda. Let's all agree with that on both sides to some extent. And I would be curious to hear what you see of a future for objective journalism in Ukraine, even post what lies when things change.
Yeah.
And if you see, I would be curious to see if when you are close to the front lines, do you feel that you can report anything also on the Ukraine side as you would if you were covering a war zone, let's say in DRC Congo, as a Ukrainian journalist? Do you feel that you have that ability, and is there a risk associated with that? Not the risk against getting something in the head from the Russians, but also internally. Do you understand my question?
Yeah. I do. Well, it's a complex question. Yes, as you said, that this is propaganda in the country. It's sometimes I hear the name called strategic communications. So it's that's a more extravagant name for just calling it propaganda. Yes, they need it. Yes, they do it. The latest reports of sociologists just shows that people have a very low trust to most of that communications. So I think Ukraine is different to, let's say, to Russia, if you want to compare it this way, because in Russia you can see that they have these small, medium-sized independent media organizations that used to reside in Russia. Then they were under tough pressure. Most of them moved to different countries in Europe. And they work, they have funding, funding from big state foundations in Germany, in Netherlands. They on internet, you can access that information from Russia. But Russian citizens, for some reason, prefer to watch Russian propaganda. It doesn't mean that they have no access to this. For some reason, they choose, and I believe that sometimes it's, I don't know, it's somehow psychology, but you just don't want to see the alternative. You want to be a good guy, not a bad guy, and that's what happens. In Ukraine, there is plenty of small, medium-sized independent media who report corruption, and in the beginning of full-scale invasion in 2022, there was a lot of there was no pressure. There was a lot of self-censorship among journalists, because they wanted not do no harm to their own country. Since we're in war with Russia, we don't want to make even worse, just to make, we want to have everyone united. Time passed, they reported it, and the problem is that we don't have much of state support for independent media, since, especially now when Ukraine is so in high need of financial support on every aspect of life. And as Katya showed, that USAID, American and US Department of State, were supporting a lot Ukrainian media, and it appeared to be from 80 to 90% of Ukrainian independent media were relying on US Department money. It wasn't be this way all the time. It became more crucial in the last year. And now they're in danger, not because of state propaganda or Russian influence or whatsoever. It's because of lack of public funds. And what was the substitution to the public funds was coming from America, and now it's gone again. So that's...
Yeah, Matilda, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, in the beginning of the invasion, all the big TV channels were put in a big pot together, and they are sending these telemarathon, which is like the five biggest, well, now one dropped out, but the biggest TV channels were forced together to co-send all the news, and the people being on these news are people that absolutely support Zelensky and the military, and there are things that are not included in that strategic communication. I think it's very comforting I suppose, that the level of people watching these combined TV stations has been crash and burn, because people absolutely smell the bullshit. Yeah, they don't want that kind of information. They want the true reporting and the different types of ways to put it. I mean, the TV stations in Ukraine are also owned by oligarchs, but they have very different preferences, and that gave a very multifaceted expression. And Ukrainians, to the best of my knowledge, want that back. Yes, they would like that telemarathon to be gone and have their normal TV stations back. Funding now, absolute horrible. It's not going to happen right now. But I think you have at least a population that absolutely can smell whether you have strategic communication or you have journalism, which is comforting, because that means that at some point after the peace deal, it will return. But there's a lot of stuff you can't report on, and a lot of obstacles in your reporting. If we talk about Frontline, most of it is regarding security. I mean, there's still this prohibition. You cannot film impacts of a missile strike, because then the Russians can see what they hit, and you're like, yeah, maybe with their 5,000 satellites, they can also see it. So some of this is just unlogical and annoying, because it just makes reporting really difficult if you can't film a horizontal line. But I mean, people still do it. In the beginning, it's very strict. You adhere to all these criteria. But yeah, I mean, in that aspect, I'm really an optimist, because you have a people who were used to multi-angled journalism. They don't want to go to the more strategic and fine-tuned government version of journalism.
Yeah.
And they're not watching that TV channel.
No. I mean, I would say, for if you feel yourself abstract from the fact that we have a war of that scale happening in a country same size as France or as a Texas state, so you will see that that could be better if there's no war. But if it's in a war, in that circumstances as it is, we have a great situation in Ukraine. I don't believe that a lot of countries, you put them in that position that you will have that amount of freedom of speech as we have right now. But the threat of freedom of speech is not politicians. It's no government. Is actually the hard situation with public funding for this, because public funds are empty, and all the public funds go to the army. And people, if we talk about like how can people support media, can they make recurring payment of 5-10 euros? Yes, but they support military. They know friends of friends who serve somewhere. Every single battalion, every single regiment, they have their own systems of support, and they all have PayPals and alternative of PayPals or mobile pay in Ukraine. People support it, and they just don't have more money to support media. But when they will see that media shutting down, they will eventually find money even for that. I believe that's my thoughts. But the threat is actually financing, not the quality or amount of journalists.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, Tina, please.
Thank you both for sharing and talking openly about this. Well, I remember older colleagues who never talked about these issues, but looked for help in the minibar or somewhere else. So thank you. This is really needed that we now can talk about it. Mathilde, you just touched the subject about digital harassment. It's a huge problem. We, for example, these days see our colleagues covering Gaza being attacked online. Often from both sides, so to say. And this is somewhat a thing that we sleep just next to, and it's there the whole time. And I mean, it must be massive to have this kind of digital threat against you, and you both being exposed journalists, you must experience digital harassment and hatred because of the work you do. How do you cope with that?
That golden rule that you need to hear something positive 7 times and something negative once, yeah, I really, really try to tell myself that, because I do get a lot of feedback from viewers and listeners, and I do get, I think probably more than 7 times more really, really nice comments, and I really try to taste them, and then, you know, the others. Some of them are so idiotic that I try to just throw them out the window. Not literally, but the comments. Other times I try to talk. I mean, if there are so many ways you can try to get somebody else's attention, but if it starts like, hey, shithead, I'm like, hello, shithead. Thank you for writing. It's been fun. Bye. Yeah. And sometimes they make a point of something that I should have done better, and I try to own that, eat my mistakes. Yeah, and I must also say that I had a fairly long stretch of being very ill, and in that time I wasn't on any social media, and it felt so great. And I'm struggling to come back, so I'm just like, oh no, not today. So I'm only reintegrating myself in the social media space, and I feel like it's like being a winter swimmer, yeah? Something I just don't want to. I want to stay in the sauna of not being online. Yeah. So I'm a bad example, I guess, because I really try to not do much there.
Look, I want also to answer this, because I have a large experience of online harassment myself, and I created a workshop, like particularly for fighting online harassment, because I wanted to kind of make, you know, lemonade from these lemons, and I can say that we can. I mean, it's not only journalist issue, right? It's everyone who is online, who has social media, experience that or will be experience that. I have a really good friend who said a phrase that I really like. Is 20th century was about getting your 15 minutes of fame, and this century is about 15 minutes of hate. Everyone will get it, you know, sooner or later. We all in that, and it's important just to accept it. And understand the roots of the hate, because it has the nature of it is a desire of people to distinguish themselves from other groups. It has its biology, it has its psychology. So learning about that makes a lot of sense, because you can actually then build the strategies to protect yourself, your psycho, from all that, you know, harassment. Realizing that, okay, they are people. They're doing that because they have assignment, for example. They've been paid for doing that, or they just want to feel better by, you know, harassing other people. It's not about me, right? Because we often blame ourselves that we are not good enough, that's why people harass us online and stuff like that. So I think, you know, starting from learning more and also scientifically learning more about the roots of this phenomena can teach us a lot in how to protect ourselves and people around from this. Yeah. I know, maybe Roman, you wanted
I
to
don't
add
consume
something.
information from people I don't know. For some reason, I cannot get it. Like, it's written, but I do not feel it's right or serious. even it will be completely hate or completely cheerful. These people that I don't know, that I have never seen, I just cannot get it.
You're
for
lucky.
for some reason. That's my issue.
There's a strong mental fence.
That's the autistic spectrum.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You, okay.
Matilda, you talked about the editors and the cutters and the people who, you can say, secondary traumatized perhaps.
Yeah.
Do you know if there are any safety measures for these people or any debriefing or anything?
Yeah, I know that it's implemented. I mean, people sitting at our headquarters and doing the editing or the strolling through horrible pictures. To my knowledge, there is always, if something really bad happens, and we will be bombarded with all these horrible images. And again, I think, for me at least, it's often much more hurtful to watch the people that are affected, not the people that are already dead. Yeah. To my mind, we have a collective encouragement to be in a debriefing situation after this. All the people who've been at work in such a situation, and then there is, at least in our company, like a standing offer. If you feel like you've been, I don't think the word is traumatized, but if you feel like you've been affected seriously by your work, you can call this number, get an appointment, which is an absolute a great offer. I don't know how many people take it, because it's also a little bit, it's still a little bit a macho world where you're like, maybe I'm weak if I can't really just suck it up. I wasn't the one hurt. So yeah, again, back to the buddy system, like, hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Did you feel, could you fall asleep yesterday? Because it was kind of, yeah, I don't know how to do that in a practical term, but to me anyway, the feeling that somebody is interested in your well-being, mentally as well, it's much more important than the companies allow it to be.
What kind of training did you have yourselves? And then you said you trained 1,000 journalists yourself. And what was that in collaboration with the military or the heat people?
It was with collaboration with people who'd done a previous version with collaboration with military. I would put it this way. Military experience is very, very important. And I know that journalists hate to work with ex-military advisors on security. Very often it's just because of not because of they're with different backgrounds. They're usually on different vibes. This general different vibe. And I know that ex-military also in different camps. One camp is like, I have seen stuff. It's not my first rodeo. Let's go. And they take in their risk appetite is crazy. And they work with civilian with a camera who prepare themselves to go to the nasty places, but they're not military. They go to the places where most military will wish not go to, but at least military are trained and them are not trained properly. So this is one camp. Another camp is like, I forbid you to do anything. Just in case anything, just call your editor and say your security advisor told you not to go there. That's another camp. There are so many camps. So, and the best way is if you can have a person with the ex-military experience, he or she has to be trained as well to match this vibe, to work together as a team, not as, just two randos in one car. They should work together as a team, and each one of them should understand needs of each other, to work together, and because the idea in the end is to do the job, make it good enough, not just to get paid well if you're a freelancer. No, just to make something that it's worth to be shown on TV, to shed some light, to show people so they can make their own opinions. Well, not to make opinionated pieces, and to make it safe or safer. You go into an unsafe place. You cannot expect that if I have a guy from ABC company, ABC Securities, I will be safe. No, you're going to the place where people die every single day. It's not guaranteed, but he will do his best, and you will do your best to make in and out safely, or at least with the smallest, problems possible. That's the idea, we train in people who. And from organizations that have no access to that ABC security. We talk about organizations, maybe they're freelancers, maybe they are even big Ukrainian TV companies, but still even if it's big in terms of amount of staff, that doesn't mean that they have money to have like security team. Or it's a small organizations, or it's a community media. It's community media that became vital in places like Ukraine. And if it's a different war in different part of the world, the small city or regional media will be number one source of information what is happening. Because they know everyone around. They know where's what is around the corner, what has changed. They walk, they speak to people. They have a huge network of civilian sources of information. They know an aunt of a brother of that guy who lives next door, and she lives there. I will get her, and she will tell me what she sees from the window, and that's the best because you don't need to go there. And that organization, they don't have money actually to have a proper accountant. They use in web apps, so not talking about security guys. So you need to train them, give as much information, and make them think about all possible risks for them, so they can put it together, build different scenarios for themselves, and find the best solution. And again, there's no guarantees, but we're just raising chances of survival.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be wrapping up.
There was the very last question.
Is it?
There was someone. You said the very, very last question, no?
No, that was the last question.
No, that was the last question.
That was the last question. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Matilda. Thank you, Roman. Thank you, the audience. We can continue informally. There is a coffee, tea, juice, water, whatever, and we can continue talking. Thank you so much. That was really nice.
gratis, eller hvad?